contrepartissant, Pierre Poilievre qui laisse sous-entendre qu'il serait prêt à l'utiliser pour passer des lois.
Je crois que les propos de M. Poilievre hier, il a démontré très clairement pour tout le public canadien qu'est-ce qu'il veut faire vis-à-vis de la clause de non-obstant. Il a déjà utilisé plusieurs slogans, comme en anglais il dit tout le temps « jail, not bail » par exemple. Pour une personne comme M. Zamir à Toronto, qui était déclaré non coupable, déclaré complètement innocent, après une période de 3 ans de plus, après beaucoup de commentaires par des politiciens disant que c'était une tragédie, une injustice grave, le fait qu'un gars comme ça qui était accusé d'avoir tué un policier a reçu la mise en liberté sous caution. Donc ça démontre qu'il faut prendre les propos d'une façon très calme. Il faut être informé avant qu'on utilise les propos comme ça. Et il faut toujours être à la défense de la Charte canadienne. C'est une question essentielle pour le gouvernement fédéral pendant les dernières 40 ans. So what I was saying is that I think Pierre Poilievre demonstrated very clearly to the Canadian public what his true intentions are with respect to the notwithstanding clause and how easily he would use it. And I think in that respect, I didn't say this in French, but I think it's very important on something as fundamental as Canadians' constitutional rights to show leadership. In fact, that is exactly what he is not showing. He is showing that he is effectively quite willing to follow the lead of many premiers in this country who have decided to use or threaten the use of the notwithstanding clause. And what I also said in French is that I think if you want a clear-cut case of how this would impact people's lives, you look no further than the case of Mr. Zamir in Toronto, a man who was accused of having killed a police officer, and when he was granted bail, people with elected office, including the Premier and 2 mayors in the Greater Toronto area, all declared that that was a tragedy and an injustice, declaring how could such an individual be possibly granted bail. Bail is constitutionally protected under Section 11. I would encourage Mr. Poilievre to take a look at that document, but I'm sure he's already looking at which other charter rights he may have. En français, je voulais juste ajouter en français que au lieu de prendre une position de leadership comme un aspirant pour le plus grand job ici au Canada, en lieu de ça, ce qu'il fait, c'est effectivement, il a déclaré qu'il est tout à fait prêt à suivre l'exemple de plusieurs premiers ministres partout au Canada, dans les autres provinces, qui ont utilisé la clause de non-obstant ou qui ont menacé le fait qu'ils vont l'utiliser.
Donc, le leadership, c'est de défendre. Why is that not good enough?
The notwithstanding clause exists in our Constitution. It's been there since 1982. That's a matter of law, and it's clear on the facts. The notwithstanding clause has never been used by a federal government, and in my respectful perspective, that's actually a good thing. What we believe strongly, and what we have said repeatedly, I have said it, my predecessor said it, the Prime Minister said it, other ministers have said it, is that the notwithstanding clause should be a last option, not a first option. We should have a dialogue between the courts and governments before it is ever invoked. Also, we believe very strongly that the charter rights, including the protections of people who are vulnerable, need to be maintained. What you have in the context of people who are accused, including people who are accused of very significant crimes like murder, is that their charter rights hang in the balance. It is not popular sometimes to defend people's charter rights, including those who are accused of criminality, but it is absolutely critical in a democracy.
Qu'est-ce que ça voudrait dire si M. Poilievre avait recours à la disposition de dérogation? Quelles conséquences est-ce que ça aurait?
Est-ce que ça... Je n'ai pas compris tout.
Pourquoi ce serait grave, le recours à la disposition de dérogation?
Parce que c'est extrêmement grave lorsque vous dites que despite the fact que vous avez ces garanties protégées par la Charte vis-à-vis votre innocence, vis-à-vis votre droit à mise en liberté sous caution, vis-à-vis le fait que vous êtes présumé d'être innocent avant que vous êtes rendu coupable, qu'on va effectivement abroger ces droits parce que ça nous aide en termes de notre avis ou notre idéologie politique. Il y a des choses qu'il faut garder au-delà de la politique.
Donc c'est idéologique.
Effectivement, c'est très idéologique pour lui. C'est tout à fait clair pour lui, avec les slogans qu'il utilise, avec le fait qu'il a mentionné juste hier, que je vais assuré qu'on peut faire ça. C'est directement en face d'une décision qui était rendue par la Cour suprême il y a juste un an et demi. Ils ont déjà déclaré que les sentences consécutives, c'est abroge la Charte canadienne. Donc il a dit que je vais utiliser n'importe quel outil que j'ai pour effectivement abroger la décision d'une Cour suprême. I was not home when there were protesters outside my house, and I want to be very clear on this. I fundamentally believe in the right to lawful and peaceful protest in this country. It is protected in the Charter. I'm duty-bound to defend that. Where the line gets crossed is when protesters arrive at my home, on my driveway, and in front of my home. My family, my wife, my kids do not deserve to be harassed, nor do my neighbors. People have a problem with me. It's my name that's on the ballot. They should come to my office. They should leave my family out of it.
Can you please adjust? Can you please address the fact that the MPs in this House comes from your party and others about packing from China? How is that possible that that's still happening?
I'm sorry, I don't have any commentary on that. I think that question might be better best posed to Minister Joly or Minister LeBlanc.
Sur McGill, est-ce que c'est une bonne chose que l'université fasse appel à la police? In English as well afterwards.
OK, donc en français, je crois que la situation à McGill est extrêmement complexe. Première chose, je trouve qu'un endroit universitaire, comme mon ancienne, je suis diplômé de McGill, ça doit être un lieu où on peut avoir un échange des idées. Il faut promouvoir les raisonnements et les pensées critiques, critical thinking. Mais ça doit être toujours fait d'une façon avec la paix, d'une façon avec politesse et étiquette.
Est-ce que ça va trop loin actuellement, selon vous?
Je ne suis pas vraiment dans le contexte et les circonstances comme telles, mais je crois que c'est pour McGill de vérifier s'il y avait une abroge ou une violation de leurs propres règles sur le campus ou des règles criminelles, parce que la liberté d'expression, il a des limites vis-à-vis l'intimidation, vis-à-vis lorsqu'on promouvoit la haine. Aussi vis-à-vis le fait que peut-être il y avait des propriétés qui étaient détruites ou s'il empêche les autres étudiants d'étudier. C'est effectivement pour McGill de vérifier, c'est pas pour moi. Vous savez très bien que les universités sont gérées par les provinces en termes de gouvernemental. So what I was saying in English is that I'm an alumni of McGill, and I think this is a very complicated situation. What I've always appreciated about universities are that they are a place for developing critical reasoning and critical thinking skills for students. And I always benefited from that when I was at McGill. But what I would say is that ultimately this is a situation for McGill to try and manage. We have constitutionally protected expressive rights, which are important, but there are limits on that expression, which include the fact that you cannot promote hate and you cannot intimidate. As to whether there's been property that's been damaged, vandalism, whether people are being impeded from studying, other students, that is ultimately for McGill to verify and to address, including using the provincial government to come to their assistance. You know that universities are fundamentally the jurisdiction of the provinces, so questions are best placed to McGill and to the province how they're managing this.
Should police be called in your eyes?
If there is reason to believe that the criminal law is being violated, then McGill, obviously, as any university, should contact the police. The same would apply in generally. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de l'intention de Pierre Poilievre d'avoir recours à la clause non-obstant pour ce qui est de ces libérations sous caution, pour ce qui est notamment de peut-être les peines minimales, etc. Ça vous dit quoi sur cette intention-là qui est exprimée?
Bien, écoutez, il y a quelque chose de très inquiétant, d'une part parce que on commence à connaître le personnage, on voit avec qui il s'associe, on voit qu'il est incapable de critiquer la droite radicale. Et on peut se demander à quoi ça servira. Est-ce que, par exemple, il pourrait s'en servir pour interdire l'avortement ou toute autre mesure sociale importante pour les Canadiens?
Mais est-ce qu'il est ici plutôt question de criminalité? Est-ce que vous pensez que les Canadiens sont prêts à accepter ça?
Bien, lui, il peut bien dire criminalité, mais à partir du moment où il commence à l'utiliser, il s'en va jusqu'à où, là, puis arrête où? Et je pense que le Canada a énormément à perdre en allant vers un gouvernement, en fait, je dirais le gouvernement le parti le plus à droite de l'histoire du pays. Et encore une fois, il avait l'opportunité de dénoncer les gens avec qui il fraternisait. Il ne l'a pas fait. Et ça, c'est très important.
Sur McGill,
la position de notre gouvernement sur
quoi?
Est-ce que vous avez un message, en fait, à envoyer à McGill, les campements?
Ben, le droit de protester, de démontrer est fondamental. Et il est protégé, il est garanti. Et ça doit se faire en respectant les règles et surtout en respectant les lois. Respectant les lois.
En anglais. Can you just quickly, sir, McGill?
Just said that the right to protest and demonstrate is fundamental in our society, but it has to be done by respecting rules and laws.
Êtes-vous d'accord avec les gens?
David, comment?
McGill a demandé à la police d'intervenir pour les campements palestiniens pour les démanteler. Est-ce que vous pensez qu'on en soit rendu là à ce que la police intervienne?
Écoutez, moi, on ne donne pas de direction aux forces policières, c'est sûr. La police de Montréal a beaucoup d'expérience dans ce genre de questions. Nous avons toujours dit que le droit de manifester est un droit fondamental, mais il faut que ce soit fait quand même dans l'ordre. Il ne faut pas que le discours devienne haineux, qu'on agite les gens vers la violence. Il y a des lois dans le code criminel très précis là-dessus. Moi, j'ai pleine confiance que les policiers vont faire le travail qui s'impose.
Mr. LeBlanc, how is it possible that MPs were not notified by any government agency, by CSIS, about the fact that China or a Chinese-affiliated organization was hacking them? How is it possible that they were not notified?
So, again, I would want to be careful with the premise of the question. The information I have, I'm not prepared to say that no notifications were given. We're determining the exact facts of what happened a couple of years ago. I think the Communication Security Establishment has confirmed that when they received the information, they obviously passed it on to the appropriate authorities. This is again, the Communication Security Establishment is a Defense Department agency, and so is the Canadian Centre. So is the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. I've asked the Department of Public Safety to give me an exact chronology of what was done when this information was received and which government agency received it and did they follow the proper protocol.
But are you saying MPs were notified?
Foreign agent registry. Minister Mendicino promised we'd have this more than a year ago. There's people today.
So did I.
So did you. So where is the foreign agent registry?
The good news is it's coming soon. I know it's very exciting. It's coming soon. As you know, we have announced a broader review of the CSIS Act, for example, how to modernize legislation that gives CSIS certain authorities. This is part of our ongoing effort to strengthen legislation with respect to foreign interference. The UG Commission will give us a report later this week. So I'm confident that the Foreign Influence Registry will be part of a broader effort to strengthen legislation with respect to counter. Bonjour Louis, vous allez bien? Content de vous voir.
Pierre Poilievre veut utiliser la clause dérogatoire pour certaines réformes en matière de justice. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Il n'y avait pas le courage de le dire clairement. J'ai trouvé ça intéressant aussi. Dans le reportage de Radio-Canada, vous faisiez référence à une allusion qu'il a faite. Moi, je pense qu'il devrait avoir le courage de dire qu'il sera le premier gouvernement fédéral à invoquer la clause dérogatoire. Moi, ça ne me surprend pas. Moi, je pense qu'on peut avoir des lois dans le domaine criminel qui sont robustes, qui protègent les gens, tout en respectant la Charte des droits et libertés. C'est pas un choix qu'il faut faire entre respecter le droit des gens puis avoir des lois pénales qui sont robustes. Alors moi, je suis tout à fait convaincu qu'on peut légiférer et améliorer les lois. Quand on parle, par exemple, de la vol de voitures, mon collègue, le ministre de la Justice, prépare des amendements, mais nous ne pensons pas que c'est une obligation d'enfreindre aux droits des gens. C'est le style de M. Poilievre et d'autres premiers ministres conservateurs.
Ce budget demain?
Évidemment, nous avons présenté un très, très bon budget et je pense qu'il y a beaucoup d'éléments là-dedans qui sauront plaire aux néo-démocrates, donc j'ai bon espoir.
C'est le crédit pour les personnes handicapées, est-ce que c'est ça?
Bien, il faudra leur demander ce qui accroche. Moi, je pense que le budget contient bon nombre de choses qui devront plaire aux sympathisants du nouveau Parti démocratique et j'ai bon espoir.
Est-ce que vous négociez?
Non. Monsieur MacKinnon, 3 jours par semaine pour les fonctionnaires au bureau, pourquoi?
Bien, nous avons toujours dit que le télétravail, l'hybride, va faire partie de façon permanente de la fonction publique fédérale. C'est quelque chose qui est évalué constamment par les fonctionnaires, par les hauts fonctionnaires, par le Conseil du Trésor, le bureau du Conseil privé, et je me remets à leurs observations pour ce qui est de assurer un milieu de travail productif et créatif, mais en même temps valoriser l'apport considérable de nos employés.
Deux, c'était pas assez. Pourquoi passer de 2 à 3?
Encore, je me remets aux analyses qui sont faites par les gestionnaires et les fonctionnaires qui prennent ces décisions et évidemment, c'est quelque chose que nous surveillons de très très près.
Êtes-vous préoccupé par la productivité dans la fonction publique?
Moi, encore, j'aime toujours recevoir les analyses et connaître les enjeux qui sont observés par la haute gestion de la fonction publique, savoir comment ils analysent la chose et évidemment, je me soumets à leur jugement pour ce qui est d'assurer un milieu de travail sain, productif, mais aussi qui valorise l'ensemble des employés. Pardon me?
You're not ready yet to support 3 days a week back in the office, is that what you're saying?
No, that's not at all what I said. I said quite the opposite. The senior public servants are constantly analyzing this situation and constantly making sure that we have a productive and healthy workplace, but one that also values the work of the best public service in the world.
Vous voudriez-vous voir 5 jours semaine?
Non, moi j'ai toujours dit que l'hybride et le télétravail vont faire partie du décor de façon permanente.
Vous avez posé une question conservateur à M. Poilievre. Qu'est-ce que vous étiez en train d'insinuer exactement?
Je pense qu'il est essentiel, et là, il y a une question importante ici. J'ai posé une question directe à M. Poilievre. Il a 20 quelques opportunités par jour, 30 secondes, où il pourrait dénoncer des groupes de haine, de suprématie blanche, de misogynie, qui ont insulté à peu près tout le monde et qui menacent à peu près tout le monde. On n'a qu'à regarder très brièvement en ligne pour voir l'apport considérable à un débat très malsain de ces groupes-là. M. Poilievre pourrait très facilement désavouer l'appui qu'il attire, qu'il sollicite de ces groupes, et il ne le fait pas. Il faudra lui poser la question. Et d'autant plus, je pense que c'est un message pour nous tous, là. On est en train de normaliser la chose. Et il est essentiel, à mon avis, que la population prenne connaissance de ce que disent ces groupes, ce que revendiquent ces groupes. Et je trouve ça très malsain que nous sommes en train de traiter ça comme d'une question banale et politique. Ce ne l'est pas. Ce n'est pas normal.
The Conservatives want you to call an emergency debate when it comes to decriminalization. Will you do that?
I think they asked the Speaker for an emergency debate.
I believe there was a letter that House Leader Andrew Scheer was going to send to you and say that the Speaker doesn't want to.
Well, those are for take-note debates. We have a very busy House calendar, and we're always working with House leaders on that.
How come your Addictions Minister can't even give a timeline for when they're going to be granting BC's request? What's going on there? BC says this is urgent.
I'll let the Addictions Minister deal with the
matters
under.
So what's going on? Why not have it?
I'll let her deal with the matters under her purview.
Is that a no?
Can you make a decision about BC's request?
As I stated yesterday, we received the request on Friday, and it's under review by Health Canada.
How long deadline? How long? How long is it going to take?
We are still under review.
And how long?
We're still under review.
Can you quantify, because BC says this is urgent?
We understand the urgency.
The opposition says that you're not ruling out further decriminalizing hard drugs. Is that true?
We are reviewing.
M. Miller, est-ce que vous pouvez poser une question? Un dossier là, qui revient souvent, c'est une question de la part de ma collègue Sophie Langlois qui vous demande, il y a une Palestinienne là, qui s'appelle Samar Alcour qui manifeste tous les jours pour sa sœur.
Oui, je comprends.
Bon. Qu'est-ce qui va se passer avec ce dossier-là?
Ben, je peux pas partager les dossiers. On va laisser les gens hurler un peu. Bon.
C'est bon, il est parti.
Oui, il est parti. Je ne peux pas commenter sur les dossiers personnels. Je comprends le deuil de Sama, évidemment. Nos équipes ont parlé à Sama, le décès de sa fille qui avait une paralysie cérébrale vraiment tragique. On avait émis un visa, et malheureusement pas à temps, et on n'a pas pu la sortir. Il y a des événements évidemment qu'on ne contrôle pas, c'est très bien connu. On essaie de peine et de misère à sortir beaucoup de monde de Gaza. On a eu un succès assez relatif, mais il reste beaucoup de gens qui veulent sortir, qui veulent être rapatriés. Rapatriés, ce ne sont pas des résidents canadiens ou des résidents permanents, mais on a la famille ici, donc on décuple nos efforts avec, à date, un succès assez mitigé.
Vous dites le succès mitigé. Est-ce que vous êtes capable de nous dire combien de personnes? Est-ce qu'il y a un changement par rapport à ça? Je crois qu'il y avait quelques personnes.
Il y a eu un récent mouvement. On a émis des visas pour des gens qui ont pu rejoindre le Caire. On a dû évidemment compléter la biométrie au Caire. Il y a des gens qui ont reçu des visas. On parle d'une centaine de personnes, c'est pas le 1000 qu'on a promis, et même davantage qu'on a promis suite à l'adoption de la motion dans la Chambre des communes. Il reste du travail à suivre. On travaille notamment avec le gouvernement d'Israël, le ministère de la Défense, pour s'assurer le bon passage, pour que les gens ne doivent pas être assujettis à des pots de vin pour sortir de Gaza, ce qui est inacceptable.
Minister, I know you're not the Justice Minister, but any reaction to Bill 21 as a Quebec MP ending up at the Supreme Court today facing a challenge?
I've always opposed Bill 21, and obviously, as the federal government, we have the responsibility to plead at the Supreme Court for the interests of Canadians and to protect the Charter. It's as clear as that.
Yes. So I'm pleased to be able to announce that in the Budget Implementation Act, we're seeking the authority for us to be able to take several different actions that I had referenced before. In the first order, and we would want these powers to be in effect so that we could do it in June, it would be to restrict flavors for all cessation products. So this is for nicotine pouches, vaping, any current cessation products and future products to those that are logically coherent with the purposes of cessation. You know, winterberry splash or tropical breeze, this nonsense is going to be over once we get the authority to do this in the Budget Implementation Act. In the second order, I want to make sure that all marketing gets approved prior to it being deployed publicly to ensure that it conforms with the use that was approved. So what we don't want to see, as we saw with nicotine pouches, is lifestyle advertising and marketing that clearly was not for its approved purpose, which has created a real problem because we do have now a way too large a cohort of young people using these products, getting addicted to nicotine, who had no exposure to nicotine before. In the third order, we're going to be working with provinces and territories, given the fact that nicotine pouches have now taken such a significant hold in the youth population, again, for people who are not smokers, addicting them as a new vector to nicotine, to be able to make sure that that gets moved behind counter so that we can really arrest and not have happened in vaping with this. And I would say, again, to the tobacco companies, stop it. You know, it is absolutely infuriating that we have to go to all of this work legislatively to shut down something they know full well they shouldn't be doing. Nicotine is terrible for people's health. It kills. And trying to create products that target children is below contemptuous. And the fact that we have to take this action in order to be able to fill this hole, and I worry that they'll find some other new loophole. I mean, they've got a lot of very high-paid lawyers looking for ways to addict kids. If they don't get it from this, that if you would try to do this, we will be there, we will shut it down, and hopefully people will see your industry doing these things to our children, and get that to be part of the effort to get people off tobacco. This is an incredibly addictive product. If you're addicted to nicotine, it's incredibly difficult to get off. I have huge sympathy. My mother was a smoker. It was a devastating ordeal for her to get off of that product. But to addict new people with the evidence that we have today, to go after children, it's just evil. And it needs to stop. And these authorities and the BIA will be an important step to close that loophole.
Dentists say the changes that you made in the dental care plan don't address their main concern, which is having to sign a contract, because they will still be asked to sign on to terms and conditions when they submit a claim. How does this fix dentists' reluctance to take part?
Well, there are some dental associations that are saying that. That's nuts. I mean, just to be fair. Like, at some point, let's call a spade here. Are you crazy? Like, we created a normal processing claim process that exists in every other insurance claim process everywhere, and they wanted us to simplify it. We did. We got it down to 2 pages. Right? Very, very simple. They said that was still too onerous, even though it exists everywhere. And we said, okay, we got rid of that. And now we have a new portal, which folks can use, where they can use it on a one-off basis, right? And so when you have a claims and processing process, there's always terms and conditions. What are those terms and conditions? Let's be really direct about them. If there's malfeasance, then you got to have an audit, right? You know, if we have evidence of fraud, we have to have a process to go in and investigate that. But the fact is that we've worked over and over beyond to find ways to eliminate that as a concern. And to say that there's a contract, I mean, yes, I suppose any time you receive money in any form, there's a contract, right? I mean, that's part of the exchange of goods and services. But we've got it down now to a process that's as simple and as basic as anything else out there, if not simpler.
Even some adults who like the flavored nicotine, there's plenty of them.
Yeah, I would say that if you like flavored tobacco products, then these are destructive to health, and that at some point in time, look, I'm not looking to abolish tobacco. I wish I could. We know prohibition doesn't work. But the problem with flavors is they're very attractive to kids. And what we learned from vaping is by these flavors being out there that they addict young people. And I don't know a single person who's addicted to nicotine who wants a child to be addicted to nicotine. And I would say to them that these flavors are creating a health crisis for our young people. It devastated us with vaping. We can't allow it to happen with tobacco pouches, and therefore it is simply too dangerous to be out there.
What about THC vapes then? Those are all flavored. Adults love them. Are you going to get rid of flavors in THC?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at always in our health system the balance between I want people to have as much choice as possible, but when that choice creates cascading unintended consequences, like addicting children to products that are devastating for their health, then we have to think about the public health consequences of that. And I can tell you that when I'm talking to consumers who want different choices, they recognize that, having if you're talking about, Strawberry Blast, that's not really targeted to an adult. Strawberry Blast is targeted to a 15 or 16-year-old kid, right? So let's be clear about what this stuff is. I'm sure there's somebody out there that loves Strawberry Blast that's an adult, but that's not what this is about, right? So let's call it for what it is. It's tobacco companies trying to find a new way to addict people because they know if they addict you at 15 or 14, they got you for life, and you're a revenue model. But what about that kid? What happens to the health of that kid who winds up with a chronic disease or illness and winds up dead much earlier than they would have, or winds up with some terrible illness that's debilitating? We do have choices, and I think that pretending that there's a huge number of adults that can't wait to get for Cherry Blast as their flavor is missing the point of who this is directed at.
Just back to dental for a second. Even providers who have signed up for the dental plan are waiting weeks or months to start taking patients because they're concerned about the rollout and not going smoothly. Do you think that this program has been well thought out and well delivered?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you take a look at what we've been doing over the last 2 years, more intensely over the last year, working with dentists and the dental associations, we've really been working very diligently to get their concerns answered. I understand, look, you've got Stephen Ellis out there spreading disinformation, the Conservatives doing everything they can, which is fine. Look, vote against it. But trying to sabotage it and try to spread misinformation, it's a real problem because, that's what they're doing. They're spreading a lot of misinformation, and it's scaring dentists. But when you look at the plan and you look at what's there, it's indistinguishable from using any other insurance plan. So if you're walking in with a private insurance card or a public dental care plan card, putting that into the system, it's the same system, it's the same process, it's the same claims and processing agreements. So I think I have a lot of sympathy for the dentists because you have the conservative fear machine in overdrive trying to scare them, trying to pretend that there are things there that aren't there. And that is deeply disappointing because it's one thing to be against dental care and vote against it in the House. It's another to try to actively sabotage a senior from getting their dental care. Okay, thanks so much.
On the Bill 21 legal challenge at the Supreme Court, what's your position on that, and do you intend to intervene in this?
Yes, our intention has been clear since for well over a year now. What the Prime Minister has said, what my predecessor has said, what I have said is that if this matter reaches the Supreme Court of Canada, so if leave is granted by the Supreme Court, that we will intervene. We will intervene in defense of the Charter of Rights. We will intervene in defense of the Quebecers who are litigating this issue and the fact that many Canadians across the country have an interest in the Charter rights that are at stake, which include expressive rights, religious freedom rights, and equality rights.
Can I ask you about Mr. Poilievre's comments yesterday? I know you spoke about it on the way in, but what did you think when you heard those comments from Mr. Poilievre talking about really hinting that he would use the notwithstanding clause to bring in changes in criminal law?
Well, sadly, I wasn't that surprised, except for the fact that he's really laying it bare for all Canadians to understand when he sort of makes comments like that at the Canadian Police Association. What he's saying is that in terms of using every tool in his toolbox to ensure his view of criminal law, his view of his political ideology is enforced. What he's talking about is invoking the notwithstanding clause. He's making that crystal clear to Canadians. The Canadians should be able to understand that for what it is. What's really fundamental to appreciate is that the Charter protects various rights of various peoples. Sometimes it protects group rights, sometimes it prevents individual rights, sometimes it protects vulnerable communities, sometimes it protects people who are interacting with the criminal justice system. He's laid bare his intention to address his view of criminal law by trampling on Charter rights. In the context yesterday, he was talking about things like presumptions of innocence, things like rights to bail. But I also think Canadians should be analyzing this for what it is and asking what other rights would he purport to override. Are we not next talking about women's reproductive rights? Are we talking about the rights of the 2S LGBTQ2 community? Like, what else is there on the agenda? Because it's becoming quite clear that for a person who's aspiring to the highest office in this land, what he's very willing to do is follow slavishly ideology as opposed to showing leadership. And leadership means defending our democracy and defending our Constitution.
What he said yesterday as well was that as Prime Minister, he would be democratically responsible to the people. And it would be the people who decided whether they believe his laws are constitutional. What do you think about that?
I think that's a bit of a fait accompli. We are all accountable to the people that elect us. But what's really, really important is that I, as Justice Minister, and the individual MP, certainly the Cabinet and the Prime Minister, are accountable to all Canadians, not just the people that elect us. Right? So that's fundamental. Right? I get elected with 40-45% of the electorate in Parkdale Park. I answer the call for all 100% of my constituents. That's what Pierre Poilievre needs to do should he ever aspire to that and achieve that lofty position. And what fundamentally the Charter is about is ensuring the protection of minorities and minority rights. So this is not just about whether the people who elected me want to see this, it's whether all Canadians want to see this. And I think Canadians take comfort from the fact that as the party of the Charter, that Charter has been maintained by the federal government, and there's never been a use of a notwithstanding clause to abrogate Charter rights under any government's watch, including Conservative governments. We've had two for extended periods of time. No one's dared to even moot the idea of going as far as he wants to go, but he's laying bare what he thinks of that document and what he thinks of the Constitution.
You made those comments in respect to bail and parole, and you, on the way in this morning, referred to the Zamir case, linking the two. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So Zamir is an individual who was involved in an incident which turned out to be a horrible tragedy, and a constable died. That's a tragedy across the board, and Mr. Zamir acknowledges that. Obviously, Constable Northrup's family acknowledges that. And everyone feels for the fact a member of the Toronto Police Services died on a night about 3 years ago in Toronto. What happened at that time is that he was charged with, I believe it was a murder charge, I believe it was a first-degree murder charge, and it came up for bail. And he was granted bail by a judge who did what judges need to do and continue to do in this country, which is exercise independent and impartial judgment about the basis of a case that's before them. There's also a constitutional presumption towards what's called reasonable bail. The judge granted bail and was met with a volley of criticism, including from right-leaning politicians, including from municipal leaders and the Premier of Ontario. What that shows to me 3 years later, when Mr. Zamir is acquitted by a jury of his peers and by a judge who presided over that trial, is that the justice system is doing the work it needs to do to get to the bottom of truth or innocence. That's called respect for the administration of justice and confidence in the administration of justice. That's very, very important. What I think slogans do, of the type of the slogans that Pierre Poilievre tends to mouth with unfortunately frequent regularity, is diminish confidence in the administration of justice and perpetuate and promote simply his view, which is that it's all about lock them up, and if that means trampling on charter rights, well then I'm willing to do so, and that's exactly what he averted to yesterday. I think any discerning Canadian voter needs to contemplate what that means for them, their families, their communities, their neighborhoods.
Can I ask you one last question? Is that I know that intellectually it makes sense to say we've got to protect our charter rights, we've got to stand up for these kind of basic rights and freedoms, but politically, does it look like the Liberal Party, yourself, are standing up for child killers, mass murderers, the worst criminals? Is that really what's at play here?
I think what's at play is you've got a choice, literally, to make in the forthcoming election. You've got a choice to make between a party that believes in the rule of law and standing up for constitutional rights, even if it's politically unpopular in a given context, versus a person who wants to lead and become the Prime Minister who would in a cavalier manner, trample on charter rights to pursue his own political ideology. Again, think about the government we replaced. Stephen Harper, I had some challenges with that government. That's why I ran for office. Even Stephen Harper never mooted the kind of things that Pierre Poilievre is doing. So you literally need to analyze it for what it is, and he's laying it bare for everyone to analyze exactly for him for what he's espousing. And I think that's the issue. It's not so much about politics and ideology between Liberals and Conservatives. It's who will uphold the Constitution and who will ensure the protection of minorities. Thanks very much.
Thank you. You know, if we have evidence of fraud, we have to have process.
Pour réduire le déclin du français au Québec, est-ce que ce sont des mesures qui peuvent se faire au Canada, à l'échelle canadienne, ou un partenariat?
Je reconnais les efforts que le ministre belge fait avec les 603 millions de dollars pour pérenniser le français. C'est aussi des démarches qu'on est en train de regarder avec le Québec. Si je peux mettre le doigt sur le financement qu'on fait en immigration chaque année, 700 millions de dollars pour le Québec. Le grand pourcentage de ces argents-là sont pour franciser les personnes qui arrivent ici au Québec, au Canada ou au Québec. Et donc ça, c'est très important. Et un élément important dans la mise en œuvre du plan d'action, c'est de travailler avec le Québec pour franciser le Québec. On fait ça par immigration et je vais continuer à avoir des conversations avec le ministre Berge et d'autres ministres du Québec.
Et pour augmenter justement la démographie francophone hors Québec?
Oh, mais ça, c'est très important. Et Marc Miller et moi ayons travaillé de très près pour avoir cette année 6 %, l'an prochain 7 %, ensuite 8 %. Aussi, on est en train d'attirer des enseignants francophones pour enseigner dans nos écoles francophones et immersion à travers le pays. Donc, on a plusieurs éléments, plusieurs mesures pour augmenter le fait français à l'extérieur du Québec.
Justement, le comité sénatorial disait que 12 % c'était pas suffisant, il fallait aller plus loin. Est-ce que c'est quelque chose de possible?
J'ai peut-être des conversations à avoir avec le comité, mais je peux dire le suivant. Il y avait 5 ans qu'on n'était même pas capable d'avoir notre cible de 1,5 %. Et là, le comité des langues du ciel de la Chambre de communes, quand j'ai siégé, a fait une cible de 4,5 %. Et les gens de la fonction publique ont dit que c'était impossible de faire. On l'a atteint l'an dernier. Et là, on a une nouvelle cible de 6 %. Ensuite, on va faire 7, 8. Notre but, c'est, au fil des années, c'est de rétablir le poids démographique à travers le pays de 6,1 %. Merci. Thanks.